Hello, everyone's Forest Focus. We're halfway through the international break, and it's been a momentous one so far as Morgan Gibbs-White became the first Nottingham Forest player to win a senior cap for England since Stuart Pearce in 1997. We'll discuss that in full and the latest Reds news in the company of, first of all, Pete Blackburn. Pete, good to have you with us. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Happy we can start looking forward to another Forest fixture. But yeah, good weekend for Morgan, so all nice all around.
Excellent. And our second guest today is a man who I think I'm right in saying was once England under-21's record appearance holder and Pete Blackburn's spirit animal in David Prutton. Is that right, Prods?
I could feign ignorance of that, but I'm very good at being ignorant naturally. So it was to a certain degree. I think they're also, to put it into some real context as well, I don't think there's ever been as dramatic a drop-off between the 21s and the actual senior team as that would be as I fell off the cliff. And it never went any further. So I think, potentially a bit of that. And then James Milner got about 47, didn't he? Showing off, still playing in the Premier League. No one's impressed, mate. Come on, give it up.
But you probably played with him for the 21s. It's been going that long.
He came in as a young lad when I was there. That's a very good point, Pete. We also had the company of Wayne Rooney for about half a training session. I might have told you this before. He came bouncing in, was categorically better than everyone else, and by lunchtime was in the senior squad. Cheers, Wayne. Bye. Thanks for that. Yeah, I think you might make something of yourself, which he obviously did.
Did you win? You won on the 21s caps while you were at Forest, didn't you?
Well, I mean, a cynic would say the minute that David Platt got the job, I think even Paul Hart alluded to this when he was boss at Forest and I was in his bad books for some reason, alluding to the fact of you've only got a load of caps because your mate's the boss, which I thought, as a 20-year-old, I thought it's a bit harsh, but he's probably got a point. And it was started off with being Howard Wilkinson, and then it was David Platt, and then I was possibly too old for it by then.
Excellent. I reference all that because obviously we've done a talk about Morgan with senior caps. I don't even think we've had too many under 21 cap earners. Joe Worrell got a few, I recall. I'm sure we've had others, but yes, well done to Prods for flying the flag all those years ago.
20 years ago.
So, Morgan, Pete, it took a while for him to get off the bench. I was worried it wouldn't happen, but when he came on, he caught the eye, didn't he? What did you make of it?
Yeah, I thought he did himself proud. I mean, as you say, I'd hoped he might get a few more minutes than he did. As soon as the clock sort of hit 60, I was doing my best to send Lee Carsley some sort of telepathic messages. But it was lovely to see him come on. And given the game was drifting a bit, I thought he made his mark pretty well, to be honest. I guess it'd be easy to forget the pressure of the situation for him as well. I mean, clearly coming on at 2-0 in a game that looks like it's probably won and England are cruising. But actually, you can tell how much he's wanted this. So we spoke about it on Friday in the member stream. He's really not hidden his sort of desperate desire to play for England, has he? And it must have meant so much for him. And the pressure's on because look at that list of players that he's got to compete with. So he's got to take every single moment on the training ground or on the pitch and try and show what he can do, I guess. And ultimately, I thought he did that. I mean, a lot of what he was doing was sort of recycling the play nicely and keeping the game moving. But I don't think he misplaced a pass, played a couple of key passes, and I don't think anyone on the pitch apart from Declan Rice created more during the game. And of course, there was that lovely champagne moment with the outside of the foot pass through to Saka, which was just so Morgan Gibbs-White. So I'm sure he's
vintage Morgan, amazing, yeah.
Real signature move for him, isn't it? That. So I'm sure he loved it. I thought he did a great job, and it was really nice as well as a Forest fan to have that moment where you're really willing one of your players on in a way that obviously, as we've spoken about, we just haven't done for so long. And I think it means a bit more as well with Morgan because he's a special player for us and someone I think we've got a real bond with as fans. So yeah, it was great. It was lovely for him, and he's done himself no harm at all.
I suppose Prutz as well, like Pete makes a good point. He's up against Bellingham and Foden who weren't in the squad and, James Maddison and people like that. So it's a very limited window to impress. So to perform under, it was a lot of pressure. Says a lot for him, I think.
Yeah, and it is really tough because, again, I think if you take Morgan in isolation, and I'm sure Forest fans would agree with this, there's one hell of a footballer in there. And it's a bit hypothetical to think, well, and I mean this with the greatest respect to the Forest squad, if he's in Real Madrid's team, if he's in Man City's team, does he suddenly become that hyper version of Morgan Gibbs-White that can change games, that can be facilitated by some really strong players around him at the very high end of European football. And that's, like I said, it's a bit hypothetical, but you could see him fitting in with that. I think the ability of the player nestles in nicely with the confidence of the player, and it's a confidence that doesn't come across as cockiness. And again, maybe with our Forest hats on, then an opposition team might see something different in him. But what we see in him is something that's really refreshing. He plays in a way which is creative, when so much of potentially the Premier League can be about stopping the opposition. He's there to create, isn't he? To make this Forest side go from a team that sticks in games to a team that dominates games and wins football matches in the Premier League. And as Pete says, how many times did we see Morgan play that outside of the right foot past Brennan going down the right-hand side? It's very kind of vintage Forest in a very tiny portion of the last few seasons. So he's got to take his chance when they do come around, whether it was, 18, 20 minutes. For him, there would have been the most important ones, potentially of his career so far. So to go and perform, to relax into a game quite quickly. And knowing, I think it helps that he knows the coach and the coach knows him, which buttons to push. So he can't do much more than he did. I mean, he comes on, if you get a 15-minute hat trick, then brilliant, don't you? But to come on and do what he did, settle in, not look out of place, and not only do himself, but the club proud. I think it's a really huge tick in the box. And then obviously the question comes with the next game and whether he's nudging for that particular start. But again, that competition, absolutely ferocious, because you're coming up against players that have got a nice berth in the England squad, like you say, Bellingham or a Foden. But look at Jack Grealish, summer off, he's come back absolutely bang at it. Yes, you might be great, Morgan. Yes, I love you to bits, Morgan, as a teammate. It's my position. You've got to get it off me first. So a healthy bit of competition that hopefully brings out the best in him.
I suppose, Pete, as Forest fans, we also are thinking, well, he's done really well, he should start. But if you leak Arsley, you might be thinking, well, I want to see more of Jack Grealish. Maybe I want to see Anthony Gordon in the 10. We just don't know if he's going to get more minutes, do we, on Tuesday?
I'd be fairly confident he'll get more minutes because he's done as much as he can coming off the bench, and you'd have thought that at the very least that same sort of scenario will be in play for him. Anthony Gordon, I think, is at home on the left, so I don't see him as a threat to Gibbs-White's position, really. I mean, if you leak Arsley, I think you could be forgiven for ignoring the demands of our sort of Forest braying mob that we're all desperate for Gibbs-White to start and for Grealish to get another go, because this is Lee Carsley's second game as England manager, whether it's interim or whatever, and it's competitive games as well. So I'd sort of be relatively surprised if Gibbs-White does start over Grealish now. Obviously, very pleasantly surprised, and I think he'd do an absolutely grand job of it. But I'm pretty hopeful that there'll be another 20 minutes, maybe even more, hopefully even more. And for him, if England can get comfortable in the game again and you get into the second half, hopefully Gibbs-White will be able to come on and show what he can do again.
Morning to people who are watching. Do us a favour and hit like on the video if you haven't already. Good to have you with us on a pretty miserable Monday morning. I suppose as well, Prutz, now the exposure at England level, automatically as Forest fans, has us thinking, what he's going to do for him in the short term on the pitch, and then the long term around his future. Just in the short term on the pitch, being around, probably better players, arguably, will that help him? And also, if you throw in James Ward-Prowse being in the squad as well with his free kicks, will that help him this season if he can learn from him? Is this an opportunity for Morgan to progress as a footballer, basically? Yeah,
very much so. And again, when we've discussed Morgan over the last few seasons about what he can do for the team, and when things haven't been going so well, maybe there's been a finger that's been pointed at him where his use of the ball, which could be deemed not frivolous, where losing balls in advanced positions when a team's really kind of stuck in and trying to grind through games. But as this Forest side's evolved, you're hoping that, like I said before, he's going to get more chance to be able to win games on a more consistent basis at the very highest level, which in turn, as you say, Matt, brings attention, brings maybe clubs with bigger bank accounts sniffing around potentially to try and strengthen their squads if a Gibbs-White is available for a certain amount of money. But I'd like to think in the interim it's mutually beneficial, because you get a player coming back that's full of confidence. You get a player coming back that's obviously very, very, very good, and being able to transfer that or dovetail it in with his Forest performances. Hopefully the players around see him as an example. If people are thinking in their own domestic situations and international situations, I want to be that full international that goes away. You know what I mean? I want to be flying the flag for Forest wherever it is in whichever portion of the world. And there are several, of course. And he doesn't strike me as a kid. Like I said, he's confident. Doesn't necessarily strike me as a young man that would get too carried away with that. I'm more than happy to be proven wrong if anyone can say in the comments whether you come across him or whatever. But he seems most at home on a training pitch and on a football pitch. Those types of players that just come alive when the whistle goes. So I'd hope in the Forest shirt there's more of the same of that, I think. And as I said, given potentially we're going to go on and talk about with regards to how this team is shaped up off the back of the transfer window, there's so much to be very, very positive about. And off a strong start, solidly strong start to the season with massive games against big football clubs coming up, you'd like to think that in those situations, Morgan then goes, well, I want to show Liverpool what I can do. Not in a cynical sense of, don't forget me in January, but in the sense of, I've played with these players at international level who by virtue of being at international level are pushing towards world class, and I've enjoyed myself and felt comfortable. So that's where you want to see him do it in the Premier League against bigger clubs week in, week out. So it's, for the time being, I think it's totally mutually beneficial. Maybe you'd have half an eye on making sure that it's tied down for long enough. So if he does ever go, then yes, it's disappointing, but my word, you get a hell of a lot of money for him.
We discussed this on the member stream on Friday, Pete, so I'll try not to make it completely repetitive for you. And by the way, if people click on the link to become a member, I've actually, after 8 months, updated what you actually get to be a member as the masterful businessman I am. So if you're interested in that, check it out. Should Forest make a play now and just say, Morgan, you probably work, I don't know what he's on now as a weekly wage, but we'll make you our highest paid player. We'll extend your contract by 2 years. It runs out in 2027 currently. Please stay with us. Or is that not the business model and we sell at the highest price and buy smartly? It's a bit of a difficult situation to countenance in a sense, isn't it?
I don't think that those situations that you've sort of drawn up are mutually exclusive, to be honest. I don't think there's any reason why, while Morgan Gibbs-White is at this club, that we can't make it clear that he's valued as he should be. I mean, he's, I guess you can make an argument about whether he's our best player or our most important player, but he's certainly one of 2 or 3 at the very most. So, I mean, I'd be absolutely looking to do that sort of business. I mean, I think with contracts, you probably really a well-run football club, and I'm sure Forest do this, is have these things under review pretty much all the time, to be honest. It's a sort of rolling process, isn't it? I mean, there's more pressing business to do, I think, contractually, but obviously you can do more than one thing at a time. We've got a few players out of contract to the end of this season. I think Aina, Bolly, Toffolo, the loan players. So there's going to be some holes in the squad. And then after that, most pressingly, you've got Hudson-Odoi and I think Nico Williams as well. So there are players that where business needs to be done, I think. But on Gibbs-White, I wouldn't be against him having a new deal at all. I mean, he's this football club's talisman. And I don't see any reason why he shouldn't be feeling like he's adequately valued while he's here. We want to keep him for as long as we can, but we all know how this works. Gibbs-White will move on to someone bigger and better than us if that offer comes, and that'll be absolutely fair enough. And on the journey there, hopefully it will have worked for both of us. And part of that is showing the player that he's wanted here, showing him that he's valued, and giving him the respect that he deserves. I mean, as I understand it, I think he's a pretty high earner at Forest. I think there's only a small handful of 3 or 4 who may be earning more. But there have been more since we've been in the Premier League as well. Players that, I think some eye-watering numbers for players that you perhaps wouldn't have necessarily expected. So, these things are talked about. And I think it'd be perfectly within reason for Gibbs-White to feel like he maybe does deserve that sort of recognition. And there's conversations you can have in those contract talks as well about whether you end up putting a number on a release clause, something for both parties to work to, in a sense that maybe protects the value a little bit for the club, and but also gives Gibbs-White something to show that he needs to put numbers up, and that there's a sort of a target on his back for clubs as well, I guess. So there's all sorts of conversations you can have on that front. I think he deserves to be recognised as our most valuable player, probably. So there's absolutely no harm in doing that sort of deal. So yeah, I'd be fully behind it. And it sounds like it's on the agenda.
The key thing with any of this situation and how it pans out is, like you say, Pete, it'll be. I mean, he's not scratching around, is he? Let's be honest. He'll be being very well remunerated at the moment. But the key thing and the balance to be struck is maintaining his worth as a commodity to Forest, his value, but making sure that his motivation doesn't dip, that it doesn't. There's no sense of comfort. We all like to feel comfortable, but in a professional sense, in elite sport, there's got to be that element of discomfort that drives a player on, and he's quite clearly got that drive himself, and he's in a potential sweet spot now with, and given, and we'll soon see what happens with England manager's job. Excuse me, but with a boss internationally and a boss domestically that absolutely value him and look like they can get the best out of him because they know him as a player and a person. So that is a sweet spot, I think, as a professional. So it makes sound sense to make a player that is very important feel even more important. Therefore, hopefully, that gives him the motivation to become that big, huge talismanic figurehead, which he has kind of grown into at Forest, hasn't he? And to do that even better, and also protect the asset, because that's what players are. Yes, we love footballers that do really well for the clubs that we love and follow, but fundamentally, if somebody turned around and says, "Here's £100 million for Morgan Gibbs-White," you say, "Thank you very much. Good luck, Morgan. Off you go." That's just sound financial sense. So that sweet spot between keeping him hungry, motivated at it, and protecting your investment has got to be made, and that's where the real skill of the hierarchy comes in. And as we've seen now, take Chelsea for example. Yes, their business model is different, very very different, but that length of contract, you probably hear more of that as the years roll on, because if the first time you hear it, you go, bloody hell, Cole Palmer's there till 2029. Is there till the future? That's mental. But you look at tying Morgan down and protecting the asset and really showing from an investment in both the player and the person that Forest want to keep him because Forest want to get better in the Premier League, don't they? That's inherently where it is. They don't just want to keep him because they can make money off him. He's got to be an integral part of where they are moving forward, and hopefully that dovetails into maybe in January, if you've got the money to go again, someone goes, "Oh Christ, yeah, I could play in a Forest side with a Morgan Gibbs-White. Am I a centre forward that wants to play with him? Am I a defender that knows that I'm in a team with him that's going to create something?" Not saying it's all his responsibility, but he's in a sweet spot now, both professionally and personally, that all around it could be a really nice bunched up little story that takes Forest forward.
What's your take? We discussed this as well a bit, Prutz, on who would buy him, because I was saying like it'd be clubs like Newcastle, Villa, Spurs. Pete threw Man United in there the other day. I was thinking about it over the weekend. Like Man City will buy a player where they see something in them and they can redefine them. They think they've got a skill set like Grealish, and Slot plays a certain way at Liverpool. I don't think there's any reason why a massive club wouldn't want to buy Morgan. What do you think about that? And also, how much is he worth now? He's got an England cap.
Good question. I mean, the values of players can be seen to be so arbitrary that you'd like to put a figure on him, but God knows. If I'm sorry if I've bored you with this before, but if you're using players as an example in the leagues that I'm covering, so the Championship, if Archie Gray is worth 40 million quid after one season in the Championship, Somerville's worth 20, Jorginho Ruter's worth 40. Forest, Leeds sold him on a profit after a very poor season in the Premier League and a good season in the Championship. I don't know. Does that then put Morgan somewhere between 60 and 80? I've got no idea. Jack Grealish, obviously, his release clause, £100 million, which dipping in between the Championship and the Premier League, and then you suddenly get that for him. So it's a tough one. Like I said, that's my very roundabout way of saying God knows. But you look at how Slot has taken over with Liverpool and seemingly has got a very good squad already, but has given them different gears. We'll come on to that and talk about potentially what the threat that they pose with Forest, obviously, on the horizon. And Manchester City, with the type of players, the intricately skilled players that love working on the ball, you could see him really thriving under someone like Guardiola. Man United, no idea. Really no idea. Financially, possibly that would be the pick of the bunch, to be brutally honest. You'd probably get the highest wages there, but that I've got no idea where they're going, what they offer, what kind of general direction they're going in. So to say he can make the leap from a club that would be right now looking at the bottom half of the table to someone that's knocking on the door of at least the Premier League, if not European trophies, I don't think it's that too far away. Remind me how old Morgan is now.
24. I'll Google, but I think he's 24.
And again, he's a player that's seemingly been around for such a long time, hasn't he? He's got a lot of game time in very robust leagues and teams that he seemingly seems prepared to be able to make that next step. Like I said, as ever, we're not wishing him away from Forest by any stretch of the imagination, but the ceiling on the player is pretty high, and it's not too fanciful to say that why wouldn't he fit into a Liverpool or a Man City, because of how good the players are that he would be playing with, and of course how good the coaches are that he'd be playing for.
Okay, good food for thought. Well, let's focus on Tuesday and hope he gets a cap there. Let's hope he plays well for Forest in the meantime. He is 24. He's 25 in January, by the way. We'll talk about Liverpool in a moment. Just before that, though, a word for the Trent Navigation. Next big event there is the Comedy Night on the 19th of September. Tickets from gigantic.com from £15. Brennan Rees, Jack Skipper and Lou Conran are on the bill. Thanks to everyone who came to the live show as well last week. Very enjoyable. You can see that on Wednesday. That's a great venue in that. They put the shutters down. It was a very windy night, but you wouldn't know it at all. So it's definitely the best venue in the city for anything like that. So thanks as ever for their support. Right, let's talk about Liverpool a little bit. Pete Blackburn, I've knocked together a bit of a team that we can kind of talk around tactically and how you go about the game. How are you feeling about it in general, Pete, so far?
Sorry, I was just looking at the team you put together.
I should have read the team out, yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty daunting prospect, I guess. I mean, 3 wins, 3 clean sheets, 7 goals scored, I think. There's absolutely no sense of this being a Liverpool team in sort of transition, having lost their iconic leader. That just doesn't seem to have happened whatsoever. I mean, they look a fascinating side under Slot from what I've seen of them. They've been quite hard to pigeonhole. I mean, from the sort of bits that I've seen and the bits that I've read, it seems like he's put a major importance on the sort of defensive solidity. And in pre-season, he's been massively demanding of them retaining the ball and killing the opposition with that relentless possession and passing. But from the games I've watched, they seem to be incredibly flexible as well. And, you know, 1 minute they'll be trying to dominate the ball, and the next minute that ball's gone forward absolutely rapidly. So I think there's an awful lot of threat to worry about, and they can move very quickly in a very direct fashion as well. They're pressing in that sort of 4-2-4 shape that we've seen Forest do a little bit now, and lots of teams seem to be employing, which makes it really hard to get the ball through. And the questions that I would have had about them before the season would have been lots of players of a sort of similar-ish ability, perhaps. Who's actually going to nail down those spots? Is it going to be a sort of rotation thing? Are they going to have a striker and a left winger and a number 10 who are obvious picks that are going to sort of grab the shirt? And actually, that seems to have happened now with Jota and Diaz and Szoboszlai and whatever. So they look like a very daunting team to face, a very good side. And I think Forest are probably going to have to change the way that we set up for this one, because I see us playing in that sort of 4-2-3-1, I see those 2 deeper midfielders getting overrun pretty quickly, and I think that'll put a lot of pressure on our defence, and I'm not sure we'll be able to withstand that. So I think I'd be looking at changing things. I'd only briefly looked at your team, but I think it was sort of vaguely what I would have gone for. Although
I'll put it back up. I'll just read it out for people, and then we can talk around it. We won't get Prutz's thoughts on it. This is the kind of thing that I thought we might go with. Sells in goal. I would imagine we might go to a back 3. Discuss whether that's worthwhile or not. I've got Bolly, Milenkovic, and Murillo here. Wing backs, Ola Aina. I've been saying Aina, but it's actually Aina. So Aina and Moreno. Sangare, Ward-Prowse, and Anderson in midfield, with Gibbs-White in support of Chris Wood. How would you go about playing against the Liverpool team, so any team that has that kind of aggressive press that pounces on any mistake? We've seen that the goals against Man United repeatedly. How do you not get picked off like that?
Well, I mean, in that particular instance, and if you're talking very definitely about Casemiro, then you hope that the players that are potentially in the same positions that Casemiro find himself in, whether it's Anderson, James Ward-Prowse, or Sangare, don't give the ball away cheaply. That's the key thing against very, very good teams, of course, that you don't allow them the opportunity to do what they did to Man United, which was absolutely kind of shred them to pieces, didn't they? The numbers that Liverpool got forward at pace, it's potentially quite frightening as an opposition player, because you look around, it's seemingly like they've got more players. You know what I mean? See the first goal where it stood up to the back post, where they're queuing up trying to get on the end of the ball. and then the devastating pace that they can then counter-attack has got to be that first port of call for Forest. Not to be scared, because they're at this level by merit. Yes, there are different levels at this level, as we know that, but there's enough, especially if you're looking at this team, there's enough experience, there's enough players, taking Anderson, for example, that are playing well. You know what I mean? Across about, you've got a team in good form. And maybe the question about the opening to the season of the type of teams that Forest have come up against is a different question now that you go up against the bigger fish in the division. This is where we see whether Forest have stepped forward away from a team that wants to survive to a team that wants to really flourish in the Premier League. So on the counter-attack, you would hope that people like Morgan and if Chris maintains the goal-scoring form that he's got so far, that's a key issue. I read one of the comments, I think it was Paul, that said about the importance of Ward-Prowse at set pieces. You know what I mean? You don't want you want to, if you get those in key positions, you want to make sure that it isn't a case of people ambling forward to amble back. You go up there with purpose, because you know where James is going to put the ball, don't you? You know, from a corner, from a wider free kick, you can gamble realistically on being able to show this Liverpool side that you're a threat from set pieces. Starting with a 3, depending on what kind of pressure Forest are under, we know that can quite quickly drop into a 5, which is, it's by definition literally defensive. But then you're asking a Liverpool side to break you down, because that's fundamentally what the game's going to be, that cat and mouse, isn't it? Liverpool, you've got to break us down. If we come away with a point and not being defeatist, very, very good from a Forest point of view against a very good Liverpool side. But as I said, there's enough in there with players playing well at the start of the season, hitting the ground running at the start of the season, to be in a game against Liverpool for a long time. But it's that switching off. Casemiro, as we said, at fault, obviously, for 2 goals. Had the type of game where, and I've been there myself, where you're thinking, yeah, there's no one else to blame here. It's just me that's been crap, isn't it, really? So you kind of hold your hands up. Sorry, lads. And for Casemiro, that's getting a bit more frequent, but he's been a glorious footballer. Let's not write him off. So Forest have got to take heed of that. James has got to be comfortable and concise in possession. Sangare at the base, absolutely the same. Anderson the same. No cheap turnovers, no gaps being given, tackles being won. All the fundamentals. If Liverpool are to come away from a game against Forest with anything, they absolutely have to be made to work for it. Against Man U, they didn't. And look, Man U got sliced apart both on the pitch and in the papers afterwards. So plenty to take heed from that, but plenty to be positive about. It's not a cup tie. These two are on the same division, level pegging. It's a good game for Forest off the back of the international break.
I see people in the chat commenting on individual players and who they play, which is all good. Crack on with it. Obviously, we'll just talk about that more on Thursday. But there is one thing I want to pick up on today, Pete. Internationals. Chris Wood's in America playing 2 games. The second of them is at midnight Wednesday UK time, so he's going to get back pretty late. It's not ideal when you've got Liverpool next. Would you start him? Or would you potentially bring Taiwo in? Nigeria have got a game at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, so he'll be back sooner. Then there's obviously the factor around who's the better player for the match and that kind of stuff. But would you be comfortable starting Wood after such a quick turnaround with 2 games in the States? Or would you think maybe let's just rest him for this one and give Taiwo a start? Or
I think the Wood situation is really not ideal, to be honest. I think many of us would be struggling a bit with jet lag after that journey, and it's not ideal. I mean, if you'd have asked me what I thought about the team, I had a couple of quite bland observations and a couple of quite controversial ones, I think. And one of the more controversial ones is that I think I'd be starting Taiwo for the game, which it's going to result in me getting some massive heat in the comments, I think. But I think there's sense behind it, partly because of the Wood situation, and partly because I think what we're really going to need in this game is someone who can bully the Liverpool centre-backs and give us a chance to get up the pitch. And we know Taiwo is nowhere near the sort of sharpness that we want in terms of running the channels or running behind and that finishing side of things. But I think we saw in the Newcastle game plenty to make us believe that he can be, for whether it's 60 minutes or whatever, someone who can occupy the centre halves. Who'll be
a nuisance, can he? Nuisance for an hour.
Well, firstly, he's done it before. He gave Liverpool massive nightmares when they came to the City Ground, if I remember correctly. He was beasted them all game. But as I say, from the Newcastle game, I think it's obvious that he's still enough of a physical threat that he can take a ball that's been sort of lumped up the pitch and bring it down on his chest and hold it against pretty much anyone he's playing against, and give Anderson, Gibbs-White, the wing backs the opportunity to get up the pitch and create a moment for us. I mean, the chances are we're going to be living off scraps to a degree in this one, and if he can give us one of those moments where then we can just win a free kick towards the edge of the box, then that could be the difference for us. So for me, I think that might be the way to go. I'm sure lots of people will be revolted at the idea of Taiwo starting because people aren't very kind to him at the best of times, but I think it makes plenty of sense. I
think Pete as well. Sorry to put him out. I think it's possibly maybe for this game, seeing them both as a collective that hopefully mashing a Wood together with a Taiwo, you get a performance of a centre forward that ticks a lot of boxes. You know what I mean? If you get, as you said, I mean this with the greatest respect to Taiwo, sometimes you play with players that can cause all kinds of, I mean, they could do it for both your team and the opposition, but if that's just gives them something else to think about, and you get, like you say, an hour out of him. Chris has jetted over from a different continent. And I know, obviously, we understand the context of how this works. He's not going to perform a 12-hour brain surgery, is he? You know what I mean? Can you give us half an hour against Liverpool on Saturday afternoon after flying all over the world? Then great. So collectively, you might have a centre-half performance in there that causes Liverpool problems and food for thought. Yes, we are talking about a very, very good set of defensive players, but sometimes that slight anarchy that comes with a player not really necessarily at the top of his game, not knowing exactly where he's going and what he's... And again, I'm really trying to say this without sounding condescending or taking the mickey, because absolutely not. He's a Premier League centre forward. But that element of confusion that he can bring to the opposition defence, you never know, can lead to a free kick from James, can lead to a little gap for Morgan to find something. It's probably between the two of them, you've got a centre forward there that can do more things positively than it can.
I do think Chris Wood's generally better with wingers. I know against Newcastle we did play counter-attacking, he scored a hat-trick, but generally I think it favours him. And I think Pete used it about Taiwo when we went to Anfield. I'm sure he really roughed them up there in at least one of the games. We had all those long throws and he won all of them, I think. So he has a presence, certainly. Yeah,
my memory is so vague, but I'm pretty sure both at the City Ground and at Anfield, he was an absolute pain in the arse for them. Unless I'm mistaken on that, I'm sure someone will write me. I'm pretty sure that's the case. I would absolutely back him to do that job. I know he got so much stick after that Newcastle game, but as I said at the time, I do think an awful lot of that was outcome bias based on him absolutely skying that penalty. And actually, the job that we would need him to do would be just to just give us an outlet, cause a bit of chaos, and give them something to think about, so they can't just sit as far up the pitch as they want and dominate the game. And I think he probably is our best option of doing that. And it may be, a hint forced because of the Wood situation, but that's the context we're in. And we talked before about, we haven't signed a striker now, so we sort of need to try our best to rehabilitate Taiwo however we can, so that both him and Wood are very serious options for us. Maybe this is just this is the best option to do that. This is a way of getting him minutes in a game where I think he can actually benefit us. So it sort of feels like things might have aligned there to me.
Just before we move on, well, it was this isn't specifically on the Liverpool game, but I wanted to pick Prutz's brains a little bit on a couple of things around Nico Dominguez. Prutz, we haven't really mentioned him at all in the reckoning for that team. It feels like he's definitively the fifth midfielder at the moment. We've got three midfielders in that team. Ryan Yates is always first sub. Mm-hmm. Is Dominguez the odd man out? And also, at what point in your career or experience, when you shuffle down the pecking order, do you get a bit twitchy and think, actually, maybe I need to knock on the manager's door here?
It depends what type of character you are. I mean, we're looking at a player that was 30-odd appearances last season in the Premier League, a couple of goals. He's not. That's not a bit part, is it? That's someone who was actively involved in what Forest were about last season. So it also reflects how quickly things can change. And as we spoke, I think towards the end of last season, moving into this season, that need for a bit of evolution with Forest, because I think everyone involved, yes, there's an understanding of where they sit in the hierarchy in the Premier League, but you've got to have ambitions to move on. It can't just be, 17th, 16th, 15th, you're kind of knocking around. You want to be moving forward, and maybe he's become a bit of a victim of that. I think everyone's mentioned Anderson, how well he's settled in. What Ward-Prowse brings is pretty obvious. A lot of Premier League experience, and Sangare, of course, that position that he's kind of working with, dovetailing in with the players that have been brought in alongside him. It seems to be clicking. Yates's part of the furniture, and again, I mean that in the most positive sense. He'll always do a job. A foot in what Forest were and a foot in what Forest are, and I think he's essential for the dynamics and the chemistry of the squad. So maybe there is an element. I've read reports today that potentially he's moving within the ownership group, shall we say? Maybe moving back onto the continent. So there are sometimes little gaps that these players can fall into. If he's got enough about him, if he's doing enough in training, if he's looking at the team in the matches and he thinks I can do better than that, then he's well within the rights to go and bang on the door. We see Nuno in press conferences. We see how it was really intriguing listening to John Percy talking about speaking to him on and off the record, and how there's a bit of a gear change with Nuno when it comes to what he'll give you. And he absolutely knows that. You see the press conference, and you might as well just see him walk in with the straight bat and put it next to his desk, because you know what you're going to get. He's not going to give you anything too away from it, because his job's creating a football team and getting a coherent 11 together to win matches. So I presume he'll have time for his players. You don't hear many players that have played for him that point the finger and say he's unapproachable, that he's got no time for a player. And yes, it's all about the starting 11 and the broader sense of the players that do come on. But if he's to remain an integral squad member, which in itself sounds a bit arse about face, then he needs to know where he stands. And if he stands at fifth choice, and your career is your responsibility, then I think you give it a few months. You maybe get to January and have a little look around, because you've got to look after your performances. You've got to look after your appearances on the pitch. And if it's a door that's shut, then football's about the here and now. And your only value you've got as a player is by playing games, regardless of how good you are in training. So there'll be all different dynamics for him. But given the start to the season from the team, it's hard for him to be banging on the door saying, I categorically can make this 11 better, when there's been so many positives and bright spots that right now it seems relatively settled. That could all change, couldn't it? In a run of games, it's really, really tough. And just as you might have a fallow month for appearances, come October, November, we might be talking about a player that's got his foot back in the door and his position back in the team and is racking up the appearances.
Is there like an etiquette or an unwritten rule about when a player, this is general, not Dominguez, can kick off about not being in a team? Or does that just come down to the individual and the manager?
In what sense? Do you mean from a timing point of view, or the way he does it?
Yeah. It's like, I've not been in the team for 5 games. Now I can have a moan. Or is it horses for courses?
It's horses for courses. I know I've been with teammates that have kicked off straight away. I've seen some that are quite happy to be taken out the firing line and just kind of poodle along. I've literally heard teammates say, thinking they're out of earshot to management, why is he playing? I should be playing instead of him, which categorically is sandbagging at its worst. And subsequently, those players were routinely chopped up quite quickly in training, which I always thought was always good. So there is no real etiquette, I don't think. It's a funny thing about it being a team game that's just made up of complete individuals, isn't it? We all stress the unity, but when we've had a footballer that's out of the first 11 for too long, they can turn into very horrible people quite quickly. So no real etiquette, and down to the player, down to the manager. I play for managers. Can I have a quick word, boss? Yeah, of course. After training, you walk up to his office and he's already gone home because they don't want the confrontation. I've spoken to ones that have said, if you're not in the starting 11, don't bother coming to talk to me because you're obviously not good enough. So don't moan at me. Be better. Sort your own problems out.
Brutal world. And just on Dominguez, Pete, he's a really good player. I think the question is more just where do you fit him in to maximise him? Has he ever really nailed it down at Forest consistently? I don't know.
Not for a long period of time. I mean, I think it's a real shame because I think there's a player in him who could have seriously impressed consistently at Premier League level, and hopefully he still will. He's a remarkable athlete. he's as good a presser as you'll find, I think, and he can bring such fluidity and dynamism to a team when he's playing well because of the way he just floats across the lines and interchanges with other players. I think he makes pretty much the same numbers of tackles per 90 as Sangare, but he's also one of the bigger goal threats in a team. So I think he brings so much. I really admire him as a footballer. I wished and still hope that the story plays out a bit differently for him here. I think the way we tend to set up is the problem, really, because I think it makes him a good option to come off the bench in a number of positions. He can come on. We've seen him come on out wide, and it gives you a sort of a change to the way you're playing the game. Maybe a bit narrower, a bit more compact. Maybe it'll help you keep the ball a bit rather than having those sort of pacey wide options. He can come on and play the 10. He can come on and play in that Anderson role, but he probably doesn't do any of those perfectly. I don't think any of those roles are exactly where he wants to be. I think he sort of wants to be somewhere in between those midfield positions. And, when I think it was the start of last season, Cooper was trying to play a 4-3-3 and Dominguez was one of those 2 8s. And I think that's exactly what he wants. He wants options in front of him so he can have players to interlink with, but also a bit of protection behind. So that's not his total responsibility. But he's never really had that for a long period of time. So I think that's probably what's not really worked out for him. And it doesn't look like that's going to change anytime soon. I mean, ideally, for me, he's a fantastic option to have around because he can do so much in so many positions. But obviously, you can't just demand that all footballers sit on the bench and wait till you need them. So it's a hard situation.
Good. I think he's best in a 3 midfield, but we don't really play a 3 midfield. So, I can see why he's often the odd man out. Just before we start wrapping things up, thank you very much to Global Telemetrics for their support. £2.6 million worth of vehicles recovered in August and £39.4 million last year through their tracking systems and devices and apps. So if you're looking for some security around your car or your commercial vehicle, they're the people for you. That's not your Range Rover, is it, Prutz, that's been recovered there?
Come on, Range Rovers. Christ. Are they the most nicked car?
I thought it's either a Range Rover or a Ford Fiesta at the other end of the scale, or something like
but
that.
I was that was. Christ, not that. If you're listening, Range Rover, I'll still take one if you pass them around. But about something to do with the software for all you budding car thieves out there. They're quite easy to nick.
So get a Global Telemetrics tracker to stop them nicking it.
Beautifully done, lads.
It's a cliche, though, isn't it? Football and Range Rovers. Come on, think outside the box, gang.
Right, so let's just start wrapping things up.
Prutz has a Ferrari.
Who said Prutz has a Ferrari? I don't think he does.
No, come on, no.
Probably got about 6 motorbikes or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only way to travel. Come on.
A bit of transfer news, sort of. Wang Yizhou has rejoined Alanyaspor in Turkey, I think, because it's not recognised anywhere by Forest. He's still on the Forest website, and there's no statement from Forest. But the Turkish club's website says he signed a 1-year deal in a 2-paragraph statement. What a resounding welcome and what a fantastic bit of business. It looks like he's gone permanently, but he might have gone on loan. Who knows? He'll be up there on the list of really crap signings, whatever happens. Let's move on.
Who could have seen that one being a crap signing at the time, eh?
Don't get sucked into this, Pete. This is on record. So if you walk towards anything that's libelous or defamatory, step away from what he's trying to talk to you about. Yeah, exactly.
That was purely
no comment from me or Pete, Matt. Move on.
Well, he has played precisely the number of first-team games I thought he would when he signed. So if he has gone, it's no shock. The other thing I was going to discuss very briefly is I went to the Forest women's game yesterday, and the shipping. I will talk about the women's game pretty briefly, but the shipping containers were in. Got a lot of flack on Twitter. I'll just show how they look. But it's not a great photo, but in person, I think they look fine. The little inset is a view that someone's sent me, kind of how the view you'll get if you shell out a fairly decent wedge, I'm sure. Because I think
how much?
I don't know. It's corporate stuff. I wouldn't dare venture a fee, but it's going to be steep. Anyway, what do you think, Pete? Do you have any comment at all, or do you just have to see them in the grounds? Because I think they look fine in person. People on Twitter say they look rubbish. But and one last thing. Apparently, they're not shipping containers. They're purposely designed prefabs. That's what I was told. But maybe I'm wrong about that. Any comment, Pete, or shall we just wait until we've all seen it at the Fulham game?
Yeah, I'm not bothered really. It's fine.
I think that's fair. No, I do think that's fair. I thought I'd mention it because people are burying them online, but when you see them in person, they just look fine.
I mean, yeah, but let's be honest. I mean, it doesn't quite fit the artist impression of the wraparound that was mooted a couple of years ago, does it? Of that glorious Trent End redevelopment. It's not quite what was said on the tin, but I don't know. I mean,
I think it was hoped that they might be able to be a bit more substantial than they are, but there are issues around fire escapes and all that sort of stuff. So I'm sure they've squeezed in as many as they can. But I'll never be sitting in one of them, so I can't really bring myself to care too much.
I'll be intrigued. I mean, given what it looks like and where it's kind of sandwiched, I'd be intrigued to see what the reaction is from both sides, either side, because you are there. Out in front, it's like sitting on the balcony at the theatre. You are there to be absolutely pelted at you by all kinds of people singing all kinds. I mean, so whether you're there on a lovely prawn sandwich day out, I mean, you might be getting a bit of stick if you sat there.
If you're 3-0 down, yeah, and it's going badly, throw your eye at the prawn sandwich brigade.
It'd be their fault. It's you lot that's ruining football in your bloody purpose-built containers, rubbish. It's hard to get offended about stuff like that, but then that's what Twitter's for, and no one's going to go on Twitter and say, "I love them, I think they're brilliant," because that's not what the platform's for.
Oh, got Lee Carsey in a national anthem on Twitter. Jesus, why would anyone care about that? Let's not.
Oh, so you hate the king as well? Jesus, what's going on here with that?
One funny response. I did a tweet about it, and it got loads of traction. And one guy said, "The people like me are the reason that we haven't won trophies because we're too soft." Like, if
people
only
like you.
If only I'd shown
amazing.
A bit more passion to Mark Yamal and Nico Williams in the Euros final.
People like
we
you.
might have won some silverware. Right. Anyway, people asking if it's both corners. It is, isn't it? Both corners are going. Is that right, Pete? They're being built at the same time. I didn't even notice.
I'm not sure because the other one's normally the TV studio, isn't it?
It's gone. I think it's gone.
Is it?
Well,
I'm not sure what's happening.
For me there. Sorry, I didn't even notice when I was at the game.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's how iconic. I mean, extra revenue for the club. You know what I mean? It's can only be a positive thing, can it? I mean,
yeah, I don't know. It's pretty temporary as well. I don't think
not quite grand designs, is it? You don't have Kevin McLeod walking around going, passing his judgment on what he's seen there. But as temporary erections go, that's all right.
Yeah, it's not the long-term plan. I was hearing the other day that demolishing the Peter Taylor stand is still a temporary. I missed that. Sorry.
It is early. I'm so sorry. It's so early for that.
Right, you've got to go in 10 minutes anyway. So let's move on quickly.
Nothing to do with my last comment. No.
Well done to Forest women who won 9-0 yesterday. I did feel a bit bad by the end of it because they played Stourbridge and the keeper came over in tears to her family afterwards. She was very young, or quite terrible, young. Yeah. But Forest are way too good for that league now. They've got some good players, and I think they're gonna smash it. They if you watch the highlights, the 8th goal they score was ridiculously good. So, and it was good that I think there was 1,000 people there, which is good because it was like 250, 300 a couple of years ago. So, yeah, people enjoyed it. My daughter loved it. Got some photos with 3 of the players. So, if you're looking for something to do on a Sunday, I think they play their games, then they are a really good entry point into football if you've got young kids. And well done to Lindsay Harkin, who played her 300th game for the club. Right. Any other business, Pete Blackburn, before we go?
No, nothing major from me. Were you going to mention the gambling charity? Or
that's
not?
my other thing. Yeah,
that's your other thing.
Okay, do you want me to do it now? So does it lead into your other thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Well, people would have heard last week I did this thing for Time Out, charity service in Nottingham. So if you, I mean, I like a bet, so I'm not anti-betting at all. But if you're having a bet and you feel it's got problematic and you think you need some help and want to reach out to someone, Time Out are a really good resource. Their link's in the description. And the guy who runs it sent us an email saying, "I thought he'd let you know we had a listener contact the service after hearing your shout out. He said hearing it on Forest Focus somehow took the fear out of actually talking about his gambling with someone." Which is brilliant. It worked. So that was like probably the best email we've had. So if we're able to help one person, then fantastic. So yeah, that was really good to hear. And we'll do some more on Time Out, I think, in the future. People Blackburn, any other business?
Yes, well, seamlessly. I was just going to reflect on that. No, I did want to say, well, you messaged me about that in the week, and it was such a lovely thing to hear. I think it's worth saying, lots of us find it difficult to ask for help. I know certainly I often have an instinct to bury things rather than address them. I think that's particularly a male curse often. And, we see the results of that can be quite tragic. That sort of approach doesn't tend to end well. So I think it's particularly important that, us men and everyone, we all encourage each other to be better at that sort of thing. We lose far too many people because of the shadow of stigma, and it's great to see brilliant organisations like the ones you mentioned in our communities doing that sort of work. And also, just to add, in a sort of more general sense, I think it shows off what is great about a sort of community like this that Forest Focus has become. You see at the live shows and the socials what it's all about. There's a sort of really welcoming, safe place for everyone to have something in common. It's been a real source of positivity for me, particularly during some pretty difficult family moments. And I know that I'm not the only one who's found that. I think this pod in general has been just a really thoughtful space for people from different backgrounds and experiences to come together, whether that's contributors or people in the comments or just people listening. We've met lots of them at the ground. I know you have as well, Matt. And it makes a lovely, refreshing change from the sniping and criticism of the rest of social media, whether that's Twitter or other podcasts or whatever. So thank you to everyone who plays a part in that.
Prutz, having climbed out of the gutter of the world of temporary elections,
I saw that. It was quite funny there. Exactly what Pete just said there. I think you're absolutely right. And in situations like this where you can discuss things that we all love and respect and have got a lot of time for, then differences of opinion are fine. It's been able to discuss them and appreciate the differences and moving on without, like you say, dropping into anything remotely sinister. So football's a fun game. It's a great thing to talk about, especially on a pretty grey Monday morning. But everything that you two have just said, I could be flippant and try and say something funny, but I think you made some very, very well put and passionate points, which mean a lot to people. So well done.
Thank you. Very good stuff. Thanks for everyone's company today. 250 plus people with us on an episode where I don't think we've actually talked about it very much. So it's good of you to join us for the last hour or so. If you haven't already, do hit like on the video, do subscribe, do give lovely reviews on iTunes and Spotify, and actually do read what it says about what you get when you become a channel member. Now I've updated it and sign up.
What do you get?
What do you? Well, it's a good question. You'll get early access to any recorded interview, like the John Percy one, and anything like that. You'll get early access to live show tickets, and we do a couple of members' socials a year. And then there's a second tier where you'll get a couple of extra members-only streams with people like Pete Blackburn and other members. So it's a way to support. Yeah, boom, exactly. It's a way to support us doing this basically, and help us out for a couple of quid a month. So the pricing's on the website. I think it's like $2.99 and then $4.99 for the higher tier. So
is it dynamically done as well? So the longer you wait to get on it, it's 20 quid by the time
it's
you
going
check
downwards, not upwards. Yeah,
dynamically the wrong way. Got it for free. Bizarre.
Right, we'll be back Wednesday. We've got the live show, Thursday match preview, Friday opposition preview with a really good one, a good Liverpool fan called Josh Williams, who's distance covered on Twitter. Hopefully, if you check him out, he's really interesting and insightful, and possibly something else on Forest Women tomorrow. But hopefully, we'll see you for that. Pete Blackburn, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to see you both. Pleasure to see everybody in the comments. Cheers.
David Prutton, thank you very much.
Pleasure to see you both and everyone in the comments. Cheers.
Exactly what they said. Thanks very much, everyone. If we don't see you tomorrow, then we shall see you soon.